The alarm screamed through the bridge of the horizon's edge, and Captain Deho knew his ship was dying. Red lights flashed across every console as the main engine vented plasma into the void. His hands flew across the controls, trying to contain the damage, but it was no use. The engine core had cracked, and without it they were dead in space. Taeyong, damage report. Deho called to his first officer. Commander Taeyong Park looked up from his station, his face pale. Main engine is gone, Captain. The backup system won't be enough to reach the nearest station. We're looking at 3 months of life support, maybe 4 if we ration everything. Deho sat back in his chair and took a deep breath. They were in an abandoned mining sector, far from any regular patrol routes. The distress beacon was broadcasting, but out here, it might be weeks before anyone heard it. Months before anyone could reach them. They didn't have months. The days crawled by like years. Deho watched his crew grow quiet and thin. They rationed food down to bare survival levels. The recyclers worked overtime to squeeze every drop of water from the air. Every conversation ended with the same unspoken question hanging in the darkness between the words. Would anyone come? On the 43rd day, Taeyong stopped eating his full ration. Deho ordered him to eat. The first officer refused. You need your strength more than I do, Captain, Taeyong said quietly. You have to get us home. Both have to get home, Deho replied, pushing the food packet back across the table. That's an order, Commander. Tss. On the 51st day, the sensors picked up something. Ships. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Deho felt his heart hammer in his chest. Rescue. It had to be rescue. But as the ships came closer, the sensors told a different story. These weren't Terran vessels. The designs were completely alien, and the energy signatures didn't match anything in the database. Deho felt his hope turn to ice in his stomach. Pirates? Slavers? Or just aliens who wouldn't care about one dying human ship? The lead vessel hailed them. The translation software struggled with the language, but eventually a female voice came through the speakers. Human vessel, this is Elder Jiwoo of the Velrin refugee fleet. We detected your distress call. Are you in need of assistance? Deho gripped the arms of his chair. Refugees. They were talking to refugees. People who probably had nothing to spare. He activated the comm channel. This is Captain Deho Kim of the Terran exploration ship Horizon's Edge. Our main engine is destroyed. We have limited life support. We don't have much time. There was a long pause. Deho imagined the discussion happening on the other ship. He wouldn't blame them if they just wished him luck and moved on. What could refugees do for him that wouldn't cost them everything? Captain Kim, we're sending over a team. Hold position. 2 hours later, Deho watched through the airlock window as a small shuttle approached. The Velrin who came aboard were thin, their clothes patched and worn. Their ship, when he had seen it on the sensors, was barely holding together. These people were running on fumes, just like him. Elder Jiwoo was old, her skin marked with patterns that shifted in the light. She moved slowly but with dignity. Behind her came 3 engineers carrying equipment that looked ancient but well-maintained. Captain Kim, she said through the translator, show my engineers your damaged systems. Deho led them to the engine room. The Velrin engineers examined the destroyed core, speaking rapidly in their own language. After an hour, they returned to the bridge where Jiwoo waited. One of them spoke to the elder in Velrin. She listened, her face unreadable. Then she turned to Deho. We can help you, she said. We have fuel cells that will get you to the nearest Terran station. We also have repair materials you can use to stabilize your systems. But Captain Kim, you must understand. What we give you, we give from our own emergency supplies. My people are fleeing from an empire that destroyed our home. Every resource is precious to us. Deho felt something break inside his chest. These people, who had nothing, who were running for their lives, were offering to save him. Elder Jiwoo, I can't ask you to do that. You need those supplies more than we do. Gu smiled, a sad and beautiful expression. My people voted on this before we came aboard your ship. We decided that we cannot call ourselves civilized if we leave someone to die when we have the power to help. The cost is high, yes? But the cost of becoming the kind of people who would abandon you is higher. Over the next 3 days, the Velryn worked on the horizon's edge. They installed their fuel cells and welded patches onto damaged systems. Deho gave them everything he could spare in return. Food synthesizers, medical supplies, spare parts from their own stores. It wasn't nearly enough to repay what they were giving him. On the last day, before Jiwoo returned to her own ship, she pressed something into Deho's hand. It was a small crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. "This is a beacon," she explained. "It is precious to my people. Keep it, Captain Kim. If the Velryn ever need help, if we are ever in danger and you can hear our call, this will find you. I do not ask for a promise. I only ask that you remember us." Deho closed his fingers around the crystal. "I will never forget this, Elder. I swear to you, if your people ever call, I will answer." "Right. I believe you, Captain. Now go home. Tell your people about us. Tell them there are others in the dark who still believe in kindness." The Velryn fleet jumped to hyperspace, their damaged ships vanishing into the void. Deho watched them go, then gave the order to set course for home. In his pocket, the crystal beacon pulsed with gentle warmth. He didn't know it then. But that small crystal would change the fate of 2 civilizations. 20 years later, when it finally activated, it would summon a fleet that would shake the galaxy. But for now, Deho Kim simply held it close and made a silent promise to a people who had saved his life when they had every reason not to. 20 years changed everything. The young captain who had limped home in a broken ship became Admiral Deho Kim, commander of the Terran Federation's 3rd Fleet, the small exploration service that had sent him out. Into the Dark grew into a military force that made other species take notice. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had arrived with purpose. The Federation expanded fast. Colonies sprouted on a dozen worlds. Trade routes connected human space in a web of commerce and communication. What had been a handful of ships became hundreds, then thousands. Terran engineers built vessels that could go toe-to-toe with any military in the sector. Terran diplomats forged alliances and treaties. Terran merchants carried goods across light years of space, but Admiral Deho Kim never forgot. In his quarters aboard the flagship Terran Wrath, he kept a small crystal beacon on a shelf where he could see it every day. He told the story to every officer who served under him. He made it part of the curriculum at Fleet Academy. Every cadet learned about the Velryn refugees who gave everything to save one. Human they didn't know. The story spread through the fleet like fire. It became more than just a tale. It became something the Terran military believed in deep in their bones. They helped when we had nothing, became words that captains whispered to themselves before making hard choices. It became the standard they measured themselves against. Captain Haiyan-Woo Chen commanded the battleship Indomitable, monster of a ship that could crack a planet's defense grid in under an hour. He kept a small piece of cloth in his pocket, cut from the uniform he wore as a cadet when he first heard Admiral Kim tell the story of the Velryn. Before every battle, he touched it and remembered that strength meant nothing without honor. Captain Swara Choi ran a merchant fleet that moved goods between 15 systems. Her ships were armed freighters, tough and reliable. She told her crews that they didn't just carry cargo, they carried humanity's reputation. "We help people," she would say. "That's what we do. That's what makes us different." The Federation Council in New Geneva debated policy and strategy. They argued about expansion and defense budgets. But when Admiral Kim spoke about honor and duty, when he told the old story about refugees in the dark, even the most cynical politicians grew quiet and listened. Because they knew that story was what bound the fleet together. It was what made Terran captains loyal. Captain Minesio Kong led a destroyer squadron on the frontier. She was young, aggressive, always pushing her ships to the edge of their capabilities. But she also stopped to help stranded vessels, even when it meant missing her patrol schedule. "The Admiral says we honor our debts," she would explain to anyone who questioned her. Well, humanity owes a debt to everyone who needs help. That's what the Velryn taught us. Fleet Admiral Kung Soon Han ran the entire Terran Navy from her headquarters on Earth. She was hard, practical, and focused on strategic reality. She had to be. The galaxy was dangerous, and humanity was still young and vulnerable in many ways. But even she kept a copy of Admiral Kim's report about the Velrin in her desk. She had read it so many times the pages were worn soft. "We must never become so strong that we forget how to be kind," she told her staff officers. "The day we stop helping people who need us is the day we stop deserving the power we have." Captain Sung-Ho Park commanded the carrier Avenger, leading a battle group that patrolled the most dangerous sectors of Terran. Space. His pilots were the best in the fleet, trained to fight against odds that would make other militaries retreat. But Park also trained them in search and rescue. Every pilot knew how to find lost ships, how to evacuate civilians, how to bring people home. "We're the sword and the shield," Park would say. "We fight when we must, but we save people when we can." Across human space, in 1,000 ships and 100 colonies, the story of the Velrin lived on. Officers told it to new recruits. Parents told it to their children. It became part of what it meant to be human in the stars. Not the only story, not the only value, but an important one. A reminder that compassion was strength, not weakness. But the Velrin themselves were far away, beyond the edge of explored space. They had found a new home on a world they called Velar Prime, a marginal planet with thin air and hard soil. They rebuilt their civilization there, slowly and carefully. They remembered the human captain they had saved, but they had no way to contact the Terran Federation. The galaxy was vast. They were just one small people trying to survive. They didn't know that every Terran captain knew their name. They didn't know that Admiral Daeho Kim checked the crystal beacon every single day, hoping it would never activate because that would mean they were safe. They didn't know that thousands of human officers carried tokens and trinkets, hoping that one day they could repay the kindness that had saved one of their own. Years passed. The Federation grew stronger. New ships joined the fleet. New captains took command. But the story remained. It was carved into the memorial wall at Fleet Academy. It was taught in schools. It was the answer to the question every species asked about humanity. What are the Terrans really like? What do they believe in? The answer was always the same. They believe in paying their debts. They believe in helping people who need it. They learned it from the Velrin 20 years ago. When refugees with nothing gave everything to save a stranger, Admiral Daeho Kim was older now, his hair turning gray. He had fought battles and won medals. He had lost friends and made hard choices. But every night before he slept, he looked at the crystal beacon on his shelf. It sat there, dark and silent, year after year. "Stay safe," he would whisper to it. "Wherever you are, stay safe. Don't ever need to use this." But the galaxy is not a safe place. And far across the stars, in a system that humanity had never visited, old enemies were coming back. The Krath Empire, which had destroyed the Velrin homeworld 20 years ago, was moving again. Their fleets were gathering. Their scouts had found Velar Prime. The crystal beacon would activate soon. And when it did, when that desperate signal flashed across the stars, it would not just reach one admiral in his quarters. It would reach every captain who knew the story. Every officer who had sworn to honor the debt. Every human who believed that kindness should never be forgotten. The Velrin had saved one human when they had nothing. Soon, they would learn what happened when every human who remembered that kindness decided to return it. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant when the Terrans called in a debt. The warning came from the outer sensor stations around. Velar Prime, Scout Captain Jae-hyun. Wong was running a routine patrol when his instruments screamed at him. Ships, dozens of them, dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Big ships. Warships. Jae-hyun felt his blood turn to ice when he saw the identification codes. Krath, the empire that had destroyed their homeworld 20 years ago. The nightmare they thought they had escaped. He transmitted the data back to Velar Prime and pushed his small scout ship's engines to maximum. He had to warn them. He had to give them time to prepare. But even as he raced toward home, he knew the truth in his heart. There was no preparing for this. The Velrin had a few converted freighters and some defense platforms. The Krath had an armada. On Velar Prime, Elder Giwu received the warning in the council chambers. She was old now, her movements slow and painful. But her mind was still sharp, and she knew what this meant. She looked at the younger council members and saw the fear in their eyes. "It's Overseer Grakthar," one of them said, reading the data. "The same one who destroyed our first home? He's come to finish what he started." The council erupted into arguments. Some wanted to evacuate immediately. Others wanted to fight. A few suggested trying to negotiate, to offer tribute, anything to make the Krath go away. Giwu listened to them all and felt a deep sadness settle over her. "We cannot run," she said quietly, and the council fell silent. Where would we go? Every system near us is either too weak to help or too afraid of the Krath to give us sanctuary. If we flee, we will die in space. Refugees forever. "And we fight," said Youngmi, Jiwoo's granddaughter. She was captain of the largest defense platform, a converted mining station with weapons bolted to its hull. "We make them pay for every meter of ground." Jiwoo looked at her granddaughter with love and pride. "Yes, we will fight. But we must be realistic. We cannot win this battle with weapons." The Krath fleet moved into the system like a slow-moving storm. Their ships were massive, covered in armor and bristling with weapons. Overseer Grakthar broadcasts his message to Velar Prime, his voice full of cruel satisfaction. "Velrin, you ran from us once. You thought you could hide in this worthless system and rebuild. But the Krath Empire never forgets. We have come to complete your extinction. You have one day to consider your fate. Surrender and die quickly, or resist and die slowly. Either way, you die." Youngmi wanted to fire on them immediately, but Jiwoo ordered her to hold. They needed time. Time to evacuate civilians to underground shelters. Time to prepare their meager defenses. Time to say goodbye to loved ones. That night, Giwu sat alone in her chambers. She looked at the few precious things she had saved from the old homeworld. Pictures of people long dead. A piece of stone from the temple where she had served as a young woman. And there, in a small box she hadn't opened in 20 years, the matching pair to the crystal beacon she had given to a human captain. She took it out and held it in her hand. The crystal was cold and dark. Captain Kim was probably dead by now, she thought. Even if he lived 20 years, was a long time. Would he even remember? Would he care? Youngmi found her there, holding the crystal. "What is that, grandmother?" Giwu told her the story. About the human ship, broken and dying. About the choice the Velrin had made to help despite the cost. About the young captain who had promised to answer if they ever called. "That was 20 years ago," Youngmi said gently. "He might not even be alive anymore." "I know," Giwu replied. "But we have no other hope. Our weapons are nothing. Our allies are few. But perhaps, somewhere out there, someone remembers what we did." Perhaps kindness was not wasted. The next day the Krath began their attack. Their ships moved into orbit and started firing on the defense platforms. Youngmi fought back with everything she had, but it was like throwing stones at a mountain. One by one, the platforms died. Velrin ships charged at the enemy and were swatted from the sky. The bombardment began. Missiles fell toward the cities below. The shields held for a while, but everyone knew they would fail eventually. Giwu watched from the underground command center as her world burned above her. "Grandmother," Youngmi called from her platform, her voice crackling through static. "We can't hold. We're losing the orbital battle. They're going to crack the planet." Jiwoo made her decision. She activated the crystal beacon, pressing her thumb against the cold surface. It began to glow with soft blue light, pulsing with a signal that would race through hyperspace faster than any ship could travel. "What did you do?" Youngmi asked. "I called for help," Jiwoo said simply. "It's all I can do now." The beacon signal flashed out into the void, carrying with it a desperate message. Location, situation, plea for aid. It would take time to reach anyone who might hear it. Time the Velrin didn't have above the planet. Overseer Grakthar watched the Velrin defenses crumble and smiled. This was easier than he had expected. These pathetic refugees had forgotten how to fight. Soon, their planet would be a lifeless rock, a monument to the power of the Krath Empire. Sir, his communications officer said, we're detecting a strange signal. Some kind of beacon transmission, Norit Grakthar ordered. Probably a distress call. No one will answer. No one in this sector is strong enough to challenge us. He was wrong. Far across the stars, in a flagship orbiting Earth, an old crystal began to glow. Admiral Daeho Kim had been reviewing patrol reports when he felt the warmth against his leg. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the beacon he had carried for 20 years. It was glowing, pulsing, active. For a moment, Daeho couldn't breathe. Then he was moving, running to the communication station, pulling up the signal data. Location, enemy fleet. Orbital bombardment in progress. Civilian casualties mounting. The Velrin were dying. The people who had saved him, who had given everything when they had nothing, were calling for help. Daeho stood there for exactly 3 seconds, the beacon hot in his hand. Then he activated every communication channel in the Terran fleet. His voice went out to every ship, every station, every captain in human space. Hey, this is Admiral Daeho Kim. 20 years ago, the Velrin saved my life when they had nothing. Now they're under attack and facing extinction. I'm going to answer their call. Any captain who wants to honor that debt, rendezvous at Junction Point Gamma. Kim out. He didn't wait for authorization. He didn't ask permission. He simply gave the order to his flagship, set course for Velar Prime. Maximum speed. Send the signal data to every ship in the fleet. The response began immediately. Across Terran space, captains looked at the message and made their choice. Captain Hien Wu-chen was halfway through a patrol route when the message came through. He listened to Admiral Kim's words, and his hand went to the piece of cloth in his pocket, the one he had carried since he was a cadet, the one that reminded him why he served. He looked at his first officer. Plot a course to Junction Point Gamma. Sir, we're on patrol duty. We'd be abandoning our assignment without orders. I know, Hien Wu said calmly. Do it anyway. The first officer smiled. Already plotted, Captain. Ready when you are? Engines burning bright as it raced toward the rendezvous point. Behind it, the rest of its battle group followed, without question. On the merchant vessel Prosperity, Captain Sora Choi was reviewing cargo manifests when her communication officer burst onto the bridge. Captain, you need to hear this. Sora listened to the Admiral's message. She thought about her cargo hold, full of medical supplies and food meant for a colony 3 jumps away. She thought about her crew, civilians who signed up to haul freight, not fight battles. Then she activated the ship-wide intercom. Crew of the Prosperity, you all heard the message? We're going to Junction Point Gamma, and from there to a war zone. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the nearest station. No shame in it. You didn't sign up for combat. She waited. No one left. Her first officer came to the bridge with a grin on his face. The crew voted, Captain, we're all in. Besides, we've got medical supplies and food. Sounds like the Velrin might need both. Captain Minesio Kong didn't hesitate for even a second. Her destroyer squadron was running training exercises when the call came. She immediately ordered her ships to Junction Point Gamma. When her second-in-command questioned the decision, she just looked at him. The Admiral taught me that honor isn't something you talk about. It's something you do. Plot the course. Captain Sung-Ho Park was in his ready room when the message arrived. He sat very still for a long moment, then called his squadron commanders. We're going to Junction Point Gamma. Scramble all fighters and prep for combat operations. Full war loadout. Sir, we don't have authorization for combat operations, one of them pointed out. We have all the authorization we need, Park replied. We have a debt to pay. All across Terran space, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Captains heard the call and answered. Battle groups changed course. Merchant fleets altered their routes. Even civilian vessels with minimal weapons started heading toward the rendezvous point, at Terran Fleet headquarters on Earth. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soon Han watched in shock as her screens lit up with course changes. Ships were leaving their patrol routes, abandoning their assignments, all heading to the same point in space. Nearly a third of the entire Terran fleet was simply leaving. Her staff officers looked at her, waiting for orders. She could court-martial them all. She could order them to return to their posts. She should order them to return to their posts. This was a breakdown of military discipline on a scale she had never seen. But Kyung-Soon Han had read the Admiral's report about the Velrin. So many times she had it memorized. She had told her officers that they must never become so strong they forget how to be kind. Now those same officers were taking her at her word. She stood up from her desk and grabbed her jacket. "Prepare my flagship for immediate departure." "Ma'am," her chief of staff looked confused. "You heard me? We're going to Junction Point Gamma? If Admiral Kim is taking a fleet to honor a debt, he's going to have proper command support. Signal all available ships in Earth orbit. We're moving out." "But Admiral, the Council hasn't authorized this operation. We could be leaving Terran space vulnerable." Kyung-Soon Han smiled. "The Council can court-martial me later. Now, we have a promise to keep. Besides, when was the last time you saw 300 captains all agree on something? I'm not going to waste that kind of unity." Junction Point Gamma was an empty spot in space, a navigation marker halfway between Terran space and the Velrin system. Ships began arriving within hours of the Admiral's call. First came the fast destroyers and frigates, then the heavy battleships. Carriers dropped out of hyperspace with their fighter squadrons already deployed. Cruisers formed up in battle formations, and they kept coming. Every hour brought more ships. Military vessels arrived alongside civilian freighters that had volunteered to carry supplies. Research ships with powerful sensors joined the fleet. Even a few colony defense boats, ancient and barely armed, showed up because their captains had heard the story and wanted to help. Admiral Dae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of the Terran Wrath and watched the fleet assemble. His tactical officer kept updating the count. 50 ships. 8. 100. 200. 300. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, his voice awed. "We have 347 vessels at the rendezvous point. More are still arriving." Dae-ho felt something tight in his chest. He had hoped for maybe 50 ships. 100 would have been a miracle. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soon Han's flagship arrived and took position at the center of the formation. She hailed the Terran Wrath. "Admiral Kim, I'm assuming command of this fleet. I hope you don't mind." Dae-ho smiled. "Not at all, Admiral. Thank you for coming." "Thank you for reminding us why we serve," Kyung-Soon replied. "Now, brief me on the tactical situation. What are we facing?" They reviewed the data from the Velrin beacon. A Krath fleet of approximately 200 ships. Older designs, but heavily armed. They were bombarding Velar Prime, and the Velrin defenses were failing. "We're going to hit them hard and fast," Kyung-Soon said. "We'll drop out of hyperspace in combat formation right on top of them. No warnings, no negotiations. They're attacking a people who are now under Terran protection, whether the Krath know it or not." "The Krath have a reputation for brutality," one of the tactical officers warned. "They might not back down just because we show up." Kyung-Soon Han looked at the display showing the assembled fleet. Rate 347 ships, representing every branch of the Terran military and civilian service. Battleships that could crack moons. Carriers that could darken the sky with fighters. Destroyers fast enough to chase down anything in space. "Then we'll teach them about Terran brutality," she said quietly. "These captains didn't come here to negotiate. They came to honor a debt. If the Krath want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The final ships arrived at Junction Point Gamma. The fleet arranged itself into battle formation. A massive wall of firepower that would have made any military in the sector think twice. Admiral Kim sent one final message across all channels. "Every captain here knows the story. 20 years ago, the Velrin had nothing, and they gave everything to save one of us. Today we have everything, and we're going to give it all to save them. When we arrive, remember that we fight for people who showed us the meaning of compassion. Make them proud." The fleet jumped to hyperspace. 347 ships, moving as one. Destination, Velar Prime. Purpose, to pay a debt that humanity would never forget. Velar Prime was dying. Young-Mi watched from her battered platform as another section of the planetary shield collapsed. Krath missiles poured through the gap, striking the cities below. She had maybe an hour of ammunition left, and her weapons crew was down to half strength. "Grandmother," she called on the emergency channel. "The northern shield is gone. We can't hold much longer." In the underground shelter, Elder Jiwoo sat with thousands of refugees. Children were crying. Adults held each other in the darkness. The vibrations from the orbital bombardment shook dust from the ceiling. "I know, child," Jiwoo said softly. "You've done everything you could. Come home now. Be with your people at the end." "No," Youngmi replied. "If I'm going to die, I'm going to die fighting. That's what you taught us. To never give up, no matter the cost." Above the planet, Overseer Grakthar was enjoying himself. The Velrin were putting up a better fight than expected, but the outcome was never in doubt. In a few more hours, their planet would be a smoking ruin, and the last remnants of their species would be dead. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "Are we detecting hyperspace signatures? Multiple contacts? Very large. More refugees coming to die with their friends?" Grakthar asked, amused. "Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Sir, the computer is having trouble counting them. It's reading over 300 contacts. Big ones." Grakthar's amusement vanished. "What? That's impossible? There's no fleet that size in this sector." Then hyperspace ripped open. The Terran fleet emerged in perfect battle formation, surrounding the Krath armada on three sides. 347 ships, their weapons hot and their shields at maximum. Battleships that dwarfed the largest Krath vessels, carriers that launched swarms of fighters, destroyers and cruisers and frigates, all bearing the colors of the Terran Federation. On Velar Prime, Youngmi's sensors went crazy. She stared at the display, not understanding what she was seeing. Ships. Hundreds of them. The identification codes were coming through now. Human. They were human ships. "Grandmother," she whispered, "your human captain came." He brought everyone. Fleet Admiral Kung Soon Han opened a channel to all Krath vessels. Her voice was cold and hard. "Krath fleet, you are attacking a people under Terran protection? You have one chance to withdraw. Leave this system immediately, or we will destroy you." Overseer Grakthar stared at the impossible fleet surrounding him. How had humans assembled this much firepower? Why were they even here? The Valrin were nothing, a worthless species with no value. "This is Overseer Grakthar of the Krath Empire," he transmitted. "You have no authority here, humans. The Velrin are our prey. We have hunted them across the stars. You have no claim to them." The Terran Wrath moved forward, its main batteries charging with visible energy. Admiral Daeho Kim's voice came across the channel, and it carried 20 years of waiting in it. "We have every claim, Overseer. 20 years ago, these people saved my life when they had nothing. They gave from their own survival supplies to help a stranger. That debt is being called in today." The Terran Wrath fired. 3 Krath cruisers vanished in balls of superheated plasma. The entire Krath fleet recoiled in shock. "Last warning," Fleet Admiral Han said. "Withdraw or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds. Grakthar made his fatal mistake. He had spent his entire career terrorizing weaker civilizations. He had crushed planets and enslaved populations. In his mind, all threats were empty until proven otherwise. The Krath Empire does not retreat from humans. You may have ships, but we have the will to use them. Attack us, and your Federation will face the full might of the Empire."
"Wrong answer, Q,"
Soon Han said. The Terran fleet opened fire. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The Krath ships were tough, built to bombard planets and intimidate civilians. But they weren't built to face a modern military fleet in open combat. The Indomitable and its battle group tore through the Krath, left flank like it was made of paper. Captain Hein Wuchen's tactics were perfect. His gunners never missed. Captain Sung Ho Park's fighters swarmed the Krath bombers before they could run. They died by the dozens. Their ships not fast enough to escape and not armed enough to fight back. Captain Minesio Kong's destroyer squadron hit the Krath, right flank. Moving so fast the enemy couldn't track them. They fired, jumped out, and fired again, systematically destroying ship after ship. Captain Sora. Choi's merchant fleet had taken position around Velar Prime. As the battle raged above, her ships deployed emergency shield generators and medical transports. They began evacuating wounded Velrin from the surface, while Terran Marines landed to help with rescue operations. Overseer Grakthar watched his fleet die and felt fear for the first time in his long career. He ordered a retreat, but the Terran ships were everywhere. His vessels were burning, his crews were dying, and the humans showed no mercy. The Terran Wrath targeted Grakthar's flagship. Admiral Kim's voice came over the channel one more time. This is for the Velrin homeworld. This is for every species you've terrorized. And this is for teaching us that some debts must be paid, no matter the cost. The flagship's engines died under concentrated fire. Boarding pods launched from the Terran Wrath, and Marines stormed aboard. Overseer Grakthar was captured alive, dragged from his bridge in chains. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Krath Armada was gone, destroyed or captured. Not a single ship escaped. The Terran fleet had taken minimal casualties. It hadn't even been close. Admiral Daeho Kim took a shuttle down to Velar Prime. The planet was scarred and burning, but it was alive. The Valrin had survived. He found Elder Jiwoo in the ruins of the capital city. She was old now, her movements slow and painful. But when she saw him, her face lit up with recognition and wonder. "Captain Kim," she said softly, "you came." Admiral Now Daeho replied, kneeling before her. "And I brought friends." Pulled out the crystal beacon and placed it in her hands. "You told me that if your people ever needed help, this would find me. You were right. But you only saved one human. We brought 347 ships." Guwu looked at the crystal, then at the Terran fleet in orbit. Tears ran down her face. "We gave you some fuel cells and repair materials. You brought an armada. Gave us everything when you had nothing," Daeho said. "We could do no less. Elder Jiwoo, on behalf of the Terran Federation, I offer your people full membership in our alliance. You will never face extinction alone again. You will never be refugees again. We promise you this." Youngmi came running through the rubble, her uniform burned and torn. She stopped when she saw the Terran admiral kneeling before her grandmother. "Who are these people?" she asked. Jiwoo smiled through her tears. "These are the humans, child. The ones I told you about. We saved one of them 20 years ago. Today, they saved all of us." In the days that followed, the Terran fleet helped rebuild Velar Prime. Captain Sora Choi's merchant vessels brought food and medical supplies. Terran engineers repaired the damaged cities. Marines helped dig people out of collapsed shelters. The story of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species heard about the Terran fleet that traveled across space to honor a debt. They heard about the Krath Armada that was destroyed in 3 hours. They learned that humanity remembered every kindness and repaid it with overwhelming force. On Velar Prime, they built a monument in the capital city. It showed Elder Giwu giving fuel cells to a young human captain. At the base were the words, "They once helped when they had nothing. We answered when we had everything. This is the Terran way." Admiral Daeho Kim stood before the monument at the dedication ceremony. He looked at the faces of the Velrin, young and old, all alive because 347 captains had decided that honor was more important than orders. 20 years ago, he said to the crowd, "Your people taught us that compassion is never wasted, that kindness, even at great cost, creates bonds that time cannot break. Today we tried to repay that lesson, but the truth is, we can never fully repay it, because you gave us something more valuable than fuel cells or repair materials. You gave us an example to live up to. You showed us the kind of people we should be." He looked up at the stars, where the Terran fleet still orbited, protecting their new allies. "From this day forward, any species that threatens the Velrin threatens humanity. Any force that seeks to harm you will face the full strength of the Terran Federation. This is our promise. This is our debt, and we will honor it for as long as our species exists." The crowd cheered. Elder Jiwoo stood beside him, her hand on his arm. "Thank you, Admiral. You've given my people a future." "No," Daeho replied. "You gave us that 20 years ago. We're just making sure you get to enjoy it too. That night, as the Terran fleet prepared to return home, Captain Haiyan Wu Chen looked at the piece of cloth in his pocket one more time. Tomorrow he would frame it and hang it on his wall. Today, he had lived up to the story it represented. Captain Sora Choi watched her crews load Velrin children onto transport ships for medical treatment. She smiled, knowing that her ships had carried the most important cargo of all today. Hope Captain Minesco Kong reported to Admiral Kim that her squadron was ready for the journey home. He thanked her for her service and told her she had honored the uniform. She saluted and meant it. Captain Sung Ho Park gathered his pilots and told them they had made history today. They had shown the galaxy what the Terran Federation stood for, not just military might, but military might in service of something greater, and aboard the Terran Wrath. Admiral Daeho Kim placed the crystal beacon back on its shelf. It was dark now, silent. He hoped it would stay that way. But if it ever activated again, if the Velrin ever needed help, he knew exactly what would happen. Every Terran captain would answer the call, because that was who they were. That was what the Velrin had taught them to be. And that lesson would echo through the stars for as long as humanity existed.